r/nosleep. Posted by u/Therical2010. The Novel House. Part 1. I do not want to write this. Remembering what happened November of 2013 is normally at the bottom of my to-do list, but not today. Today this is a story that I need to tell. I've told it before to some close friends and family, but never like this. I need to write it. It's been more than a year and I still can't sleep, so I might as well type. I'll post updates as I write them. My name is Rachel Smith and the Novel House was haunted. Sorry if that's a spoiler for you, but I've had enough suspense to last me 8 lifetimes. I'm going to tell you about what happened to me, and what happened to my best friend during our second year of college. I won't exaggerate or change any part of the story because this isn't just a story to me. I know some people don't believe me. I don't care. This is for the people that do, for the people that will, for the people who will experience what I have. If anything like this has ever happened to you, you are not alone, and you can make it through. I wish I had someone to tell me that. I've thought a lot about whether I should change the names or not. Since I'm posting this on my account, I've decided to keep my name the same, but change the other people involved. I was 19 years old and in my second year of school. A music major down at Snow College, I aspired to score films. I was going to be the next Hans Zimmer and I was going to change the face of the music industry and the world. In that order. This was going to be a great year. Our truck pulled in front of the house and I laughed for the millionth time. No more crappy college dorms. I was renting a house with a real kitchen and a living room with couches where everyone could sit and talk. There was a backyard and real bathrooms. The White House was surrounded by huge trees that offered privacy, a newly painted red picket fence, and a cobblestone walkway that led to the front door. It had taken quite a bit of work to get us here, but I talked to the landlord early enough that our places were secured before anyone else applied. By us I mean me and my best friend Vanessa. I'd met her fall semester of last year in our music theory class. We bonded over making fun of the teacher. She walked with me to get my mail. I went to her apartment that night for a crepe party and we were inseparable from then on. But life is messy and complicated. After a year of near-perfect friendship, we had a falling out. We hadn't parted on the best of terms, but by then we'd already signed the contract to live together the next year. Like it or not, we were going to be roommates. I opened the car door and hopped down onto the cracked Ephraim Road. I'd missed this road. My family piled out of the truck and started to unload my things from the back. Before I could worry too much about seeing Ness, the front door opened and she came running out to meet me. It was like no time had passed at all. I think that's how real friendships work. We hugged. She was smaller than I remembered, and she immediately started taking boxes out of the truck bed. I don't have the best memory when it comes to little details, but I remember her outfit clearly. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a camo handkerchief, her shirt was neon orange with the sleeves cut out and she wore big baggy gray sweats. I remember that she apologized for what she was wearing. She switched outfits after my family went home, but I didn't mind. It was nice to see her after a summer apart. We hadn't spoken in months, but it looked like everything was going to be okay. I took hold of a suitcase, the one with wheels because I'm all about minimizing effort, and helped herd my family into the house. Sunlight streamed through the large windows and the living room in the kitchen was a buttery yellow with white trim. The Novel House, for so it was called, was around 100 years old. The windows were all the original glass, the kind that was sort of warped and wavy, and the stairs were narrow and very steep. They went up for around 10 steps, then there was a 3-foot by 3-foot landing, a sharp corner, and 4 more steps into the smallest hallway you have ever seen in your life. From the top step to the back wall was probably 4 feet. It was up these stairs that my luggage had to go. At the top of the stairs there were 2 doorways opposite each other. These were the upstairs bedrooms. Our room was the door on the left. It was the best room in the whole house. For one, it was the biggest. Our room was directly above the living room and took up 70% of the second floor. After an awkward stair that was placed oddly in the doorway, you stepped down into our room. The ceiling sloped down with the roof at one end and there were 3 windows in total, 2 looking off towards the college and 1 looking into the front yard. The sunlight poured in through these windows. The trees reached the top of the house here and the leaves filtered the sunlight, lighting up the room with bright greens and yellows. We piled my belongings into the room, a seemingly endless train of people carrying boxes and bags. My father and my mother carried the heavy things with me while my 3 younger siblings grabbed the pillows, bedding, and whatever other such items they could find. As my youngest sister walked into the house for the first time she looked at me and said, "This house feels funny. I don't think that I like it." Her face sort of scrunched up as she looked around. "Don't be silly, Laura. I dismissed her with a grin. This house is perfect. The only requirement in my head for the house to qualify was that it be a house. The fact that it existed and was mine made it the greatest house that had ever been built. She followed me up the stairs carrying a lamp, and when she entered our room she made the same sort of face. I just don't like it. It feels strange. I don't feel anything, I replied. Except heat. Is the fan still in the truck? That's going to be necessary. I'll go grab it. Looking back, we did everything wrong. If our life had been a scary movie, that would have been the first sign, the harbinger of doom. But our life wasn't a movie. It was our life. In hindsight, I can see all of the signs that we ignored. I can see everything that we did wrong, but at the time we were just living. We were happy. After everything was shuttled into the house, my parents took Ness and me to Walmart to stock up on food. As college kids, this was one of the greatest gestures of kindness that we could comprehend. They bought us chicken and rice and cheese and bread, enough for a lifetime, or so it felt like. At the store, under the harsh fluorescent lights of Ephraim's Walmart, Ness and I fell back into sync. Whatever differences we'd had in the past melted away. It was like nothing had changed between us, as though it had been a mere day since we'd been together, even though we'd spent the summer not speaking. My parents told me later that they were thrilled to see us get along so well. They had been worried about us, but it took 5 minutes of shopping to see that we were going to be fine. Maybe better than fine. Eventually my family had to go. I hugged them, we exchanged our tearful goodbyes, and I watched them drive away. It was sad to be away from my family. I had such good relationships with them all. But there is nothing like living on your own. And now I had a house to live in. Things weren't quite perfect though. The house was absolutely filthy. Dirt rimmed the bathtubs, cobwebs hung from the entirety of the kitchen ceiling, and the basement had no positive qualities to speak of. But we were undeterred. The first few hours of our new life were dedicated to an intense cleaning, but it was fun. I was wearing a black lacy dress, a stark contrast to her jeans and plaid shirt. But we got down and scrubbed and polished and organized like it was a treat. There were a few odd things that we discovered. In the living room there was a 4-foot by 4-foot vent in the floor. The floor around it creaked and groaned, bending under the weight of anyone who stepped on it. Outside there were little handprints rusted into the stucco walls. They were outside every door and under every window. We tried to get them off, thinking they were just dirt handprints at first, but nothing we did had any effect. After a while we turned our attention to the basement. The stairs were wooden slats, the kind you see in scary movies. The walls crumbled away if you touched them, and the floor was just dirt covered in layers of rugs. There was trash everywhere, old boxes, packing supplies, extension cords, old food. It was awful. In the initial tour of the house we hadn't been told there was a basement at all. It was news to us, but we were excited about it. We dreamed of cleaning it up, purchasing some Christmas lights and old couches, and turning the place into a den where we could get together and party. It was a good dream. We immediately set to work cleaning the basement. We picked up all the trash, threw out the rotten food, and cleaned around the old, disconnected water heaters. It wasn't glamorous work, but this was our honeymoon phase and we were loving it. In the northeast corner a large refrigerator box stood propped up in the corner. We hadn't thought about it much. Ness picked up an old cardboard box from the ground and that refrigerator box began to fall, light as a feather, in slow motion. She stepped out of the way, a reflex, and then the basement exploded. Another water heater had been behind that box. Without reason it had fallen nearly on top of her. 800 pounds of water came gushing out of the top and for a second we stood there in shock. Then we got to work. We couldn't move it at all, it was much too heavy. But the basement was quickly filling with water, soaking the old rugs and turning the floor into mud. Ness ran upstairs and came back with 2 plastic ice cream buckets that had previously been under the sink. We bailed out the basement. She filled up 1 bucket, I ran it upstairs and dumped it out in the sink, then ran back downstairs and traded her an empty bucket for a full one. I don't remember how long we did this for. It felt like an eternity. Then finally we heard our roommates, whom we had not yet met, come home. We shouted upstairs for them to come and help us. Thankfully, they were lovely people and came to our rescue on that Friday night. Bryce, Taylor, Kaylee, and Michaela helped us lift the water heater off the dirt floor, but we couldn't get it to lean back up against the wall. There was a hill of dirt in the way and we weren't sure how it had ever sat there in the first place. There didn't seem to be any room for it. Eventually Ness used one of the old buckets to dig out a hole where we could place the water heater. Once that was done we had a muddy floor and a whole mess of wet rugs. The basement was too humid for them to dry on their own. We would have to take them out. It was a great way to get to know your roommates, That's for sure. By then it was pretty late. The next day was Saturday, so we decided to take care of it then. We left the soggy basement and made the long trek up to the second floor. As we walked through the kitchen I thought I saw something reflected in the far window. It looked like a person standing behind me, but I was last in the line to go upstairs. When I turned around, there was no one there. I just assumed that it was the warped glass doing strange things to the reflections, and went to bed. But that wasn't the last time I'd see that reflection. It wasn't until the next day that I understood the gravity of what had happened. If Ness hadn't stepped out of the way, she would have been crushed by the water heater. The two of us together couldn't even roll it. I wouldn't have been able to do anything to help her. I would have watched my best friend die. But she had stepped out of the way. So even if there was no reason for that heater to have fallen in the first place, it didn't matter now. Right? The Nova House. Part 2. The next morning we got to work. Ness and I always carry knives with us, hers in her pocket and mine hooked onto my bra, and they sure came in handy that day. The rugs in the basement must have been there for decades. As soon as we pulled up the first one we discovered 3 more underneath. They were so large we had to cut them into pieces so that we could carry them upstairs and out to the backyard. The final number was around 20 rugs. The oldest one had decomposed into strips of old woven fabric. We didn't even realize it was a rug at first. They were molded and slimy with the old water from the ruptured tank. Hours later, once we had finished, we wanted nothing more than to get out of our nasty clothes and take a shower. We climbed out of the basement and started up the steep stairs leading to our room, when I noticed something odd. "Hey Ness, come back," I said. We both went back down to the kitchen. "Now walk up the stairs and listen carefully." She looked confused, but she started walking up the stairs. After every step she took there was a clear thump. An echo footstep. She laughed and we marveled at the sounds an old house could make. Part of the contract we signed informed us that the walls had once been covered in lead paint and basically absolved our landlord of blame if we decided to lick the walls. Yeah, it was an old house. We had never noticed it before because there had always been multiple people on the stairs at a time. Now it was easy to hear. Every time we went up the stairs it sounded as though someone were walking up the stairs behind us. After showering, we sat down to lunch and just talked. We hadn't talked like that in months. It was really nice to spend time with her again. Eventually we both noted how cold the room had been last night. Despite the warm weather, we had both nearly frozen in our beds. We asked the other girls later if they had the same problem, but they had all kept their fans on all night. We chalked it up to having a big attic room and an inadequate heating system in the house. Now let me briefly introduce you to my roommates. Bryce was your stereotypical Mormon girl from Valley. She had a missionary in the field that she was waiting for. They were going to get married when he came home. Taylor was also Mormon, and a country girl through and through. She wore cowboy boots and left every night to go feed her horses. She was flat out awesome. Kaylee was from the Ephraim area. She'd lived there her whole life so it was only natural for her to attend snow. She didn't know exactly what she wanted to do with her life, but she was toying with the idea of being an in-home caregiver. Hannah came a few weeks later. She was only going to be there for a semester because she was leaving on a mission. I forget where she was called to go, sorry. She was the sweetest, most innocent thing in the world. And Michaela wasn't actually one of our roommates, but she was around often enough that she might as well have been. She was a gorgeous girl with the biggest set of boobs that I have ever seen. They were so big that she was saving up to have reduction surgery. But other than that, she was pretty normal. Well, mostly. See, I figured out pretty quickly that Michaela was an empath. I didn't really believe in the supernatural, but I did not believe it, if that makes sense. I'd had my fair share of experiences as a child that left the possibility open for me. If you guys like this story I might tell you about my childhood house. Michaela wanted to be a chiropractor and boy was that her calling. She always knew exactly which part of you was hurting. Always. She described it as a heat coming off your body where you were in pain. She tried to teach it to me once, but I never felt anything like what she described. But you never needed to tell her where you were sore, or if you slept on your neck funny. She could just tell. And in a flash she'd find the right muscle or crack the right joint and you'd be better. I called her an empath one night, almost in jest, but then we both did some research on the term and it actually matched her perfectly. I didn't really believe it, but I would never turn down a Michaela massage. The other thing I'll mention is that I read palms. It's all a bunch of bullshit, but I'm really good at cold reading people. I've read a lot of books about it and I'll throw in some actual predictions with what I can guess about them, and everyone and their mother clamors to have me read their palm. It's great for parties. So along the same vein, I thought it would be fun to buy a deck of tarot cards. It was just another way to do cold readings for people, but it was fun too. After a few days my pack came in the mail and I immediately started doing readings for people. I didn't know what each card meant yet, so after I arranged the cards in the cross pattern, I had to read what each one meant from the little mini guide that came with the deck. The deck had a habit of being too right. Slightly more than you could just brush off. I didn't do cold readings at first, I just read straight from the manual. But the deck was almost never wrong. I brushed it off as confirmation bias. The same way people think their horoscopes are real. But the cards would later come to prove me wrong. Around this time Ness started spending nights with her boyfriend Caden. He was a country boy from Gunnison, and frankly the last person I would have ever pictured her with, but they seemed truly happy together, so I was happy for them. But that meant I was spending nights in our room alone. Now, I've always been an introverted person. I've never needed other people and never had a problem being alone. But for some reason, every time she spent the night somewhere else, I had really terrible nightmares. I'd wake up and could never remember what they had been about, which was unusual for me, but the feeling of absolute terror was hard to shake. But I wasn't going to ruin her happiness by asking her to stay with me at night. I was an adult. I could handle it. Then Hannah moved in. Her room was connected to ours, meaning you had to walk through our room to get to hers. There was a big medical curtain that you could pull shut to make a hallway between both doors so that the rooms would be a little more private, but the curtain was really creepy at night, so we always kept it open. It was an odd arrangement, but Hannah tried to be as respectful as she could in the mornings. It was never really a problem. Except for sometimes she would forget to shut her door when she left. For some reason her room was always darker than the rest of the house. She would leave her door open and it was just this doorway into darkness, even during the day. It creeped me out though I couldn't say why. Whenever I saw it open I would walk over immediately and pull it shut. Sometimes it took 2 or 3 tries because for some reason the door wouldn't stay closed. I'd shut it, the metal tongue thing would click into place, I would turn around, and the door would swing silently open again. It was infuriating and while I struggled with the door, I couldn't help but look into the dark room as it kept swinging open. It would make me a little panicky and I'd try over and over to get the damn thing shut so I wouldn't have to see the darkness. This never happened when Ness was in the room with me. Only when I was alone. But it wasn't a big enough deal to tell her about, so I didn't. One thing she did notice was our closet door. We had one little closet between the two of us, so the little space was jam-packed with clothes. Our shoes didn't have any place to go, let alone all the scarves we needed for Ephraim winters. But the door was hung on a tilt or something and was always swinging shut on us. So Ness went out and bought a little plastic shelf for her millions of shoes and we placed it in front of the open closet door. We put hooks on the door for all our scarves and the shoe rack was heavy enough to keep the door open. A brilliant solution, or so we thought. There were days when we came home to a wreck. The door would be shut, the shoe rack overturned, and scarves and shoes would be strewn across the floor. I don't know why that didn't clue us into what was happening, but we just didn't think it was anything paranormal. It was like the house had to shout to get our attention. And it did. It started with the reflections. That's what finally clued us into what was wrong. Ness was doing her makeup one morning before class. We had 3 mirrors in our room. One hung on the wall next to her bed, one on the opposite wall just above the shoe rack, and one on the desk next to mine. I was busy putting on mascara when she gasped. I turned to see what was wrong, and she had dropped her makeup brush. She spun around and stared at the opposite mirror. "What is it?" I asked. She was breathing heavily and her face was white. I thought I saw something. It must have been the scarves on the door. "Sorry." She panted and shook her head. The next day I walked past the mirror to get to my bed, and I saw something out of the corner of my eye. It was a woman reflected in the mirror. There was no mistaking it. She was in front of the closet door. I couldn't be sure because it happened so fast, but it looked like she was turning towards me. I didn't tell Ness. That night Ness saw the woman again and she flipped. She got angry. She tore the mirror off the wall and placed it reflective side to the wall, on the floor. "That's enough of that," she said. Now that I think about it, if we had communicated more things might have gone differently. But how do you tell someone that you're seeing impossible things without sounding crazy? Soon after that things started going missing. We'd look for a few days and then find them in the most random places. The most memorable time this happened was when I lost my blue glass heart. It was a souvenir from the time I took my siblings to the Natural History Museum. I bought them both one in different colors. They were useless, but looked pretty cool. I kept mine on the desk and never thought much about it until one day I realized it was missing. I asked Ness if she had seen it and she replied that she hadn't seen it in a few days. The next Saturday we were doing our weekly deep cleaning. I just vacuumed our room and Ness was making her bed. I had been really thorough. I even vacuumed underneath our beds, which was easy because they were on risers. I was rolling up the vacuum cord when we both heard a thump come from underneath my bed. We looked at each other and then at the floor. Slowly we each bent down and looked under the bed. There, at the very edge of the blanket, was the blue glass heart. I knew for a fact that it had not been there before because I vacuumed that exact spot minutes before. Ness had seen me do it. There was no logical way that the heart could be there. But it was. It was right after this that the house started to amp up its tactics. That was probably the last time I slept at night. After that I couldn't bear the darkness. Ness started spending every single night with Caden and I spent nights in the living room with the lights on and movies playing on my laptop. My sleepless nights started with a woman in the basement. The Nova House. Part 3. Up until this point I focused on the events in our bedroom. That was small change compared to what went on in the basement. At first it was just unease, the feeling that you weren't alone, that someone was watching you. We wouldn't have gone down there at all, but that's where a lot of our food was stored. There was a big freezer in the left corner opposite from the stairs and a shelf where we kept our dry food at the bottom of the stairs. I have pictures. I'll post them here if I can figure out how. In front of the freezer was another water heater, making a total of 3 in the basement. One hooked up to the house, one in the corner that had nearly killed Ness, and one sitting unhooked and still full of water off to the side. Almost every time we opened the door the light was on. We mentioned to everyone in the house that we had to keep the light off because of the electricity bill, but everyone denied leaving it on. So we just asked them to be more mindful of it. We started to feel cramped whenever we went to get food out of the freezer. It was like the water heater was getting closer and closer to the freezer, leaving less space in between. We thought it was just our imagination until we looked at the dirt one day. There was a streak of rust as through the water heater had been pushed in the direction of the freezer. We tried to move it ourselves once to see if it could have been our roommates playing a prank. 2 of us together couldn't budge it. If I figure out how to post the picture, you can see the rust streak where it moved. Sometime we swore it moved in between trips. We'd go down to the basement to get chicken for dinner, cook the food, and then bring it back down to freeze and the heater would have moved. Worse than the heater though was the noise. There was this scuttling. I hate to describe it like that because it's such an accurate word. It still gives me chills. It was like something was scuttling around in the corners of the basement or under the stairs when you weren't looking. When you walked up the basement steps it felt like someone was breathing on your neck. We never went down to the basement alone if we could help it. It's not like we asked for someone to come with us. If I saw Ness going down the steps I'd follow her, and she would do the same for me. It was just precaution. That's what I told myself. I still hadn't been able to face what was going on, to admit it to myself. That changed in a single evening. Ness was cooking dinner. Hannah and I were at the kitchen table talking when she asked me if I would read her cards for her. She'd seen me do tarot readings for the other girls. I'd never offered to read her cards because I'd just assumed that she would say no. But she seemed really excited. So I grabbed my deck and started shuffling. I watched Ness go over to the basement door. "Want me to come?" I asked. "Nah, I got it." She was always braver than me. The basement light was really old. It had one of those round switches and you either had to flick it on and off a million times before the lights came on, or you had to wait while the lights flickered on their own before deciding to actually light up the room. Either way you had a flashy strobe light effect going on that was the opposite of a good time. Anyway, Ness opened the basement door into darkness, the same as usual, and began to flick the light switch. I was busy getting the deck ready for Hannah, so I wasn't paying much attention, but I heard it when Ness gasped. I looked up in time to see her slam the door shut and back up against the far wall. Her eyes were wide. She met my glance and I wanted to ask her what she had seen, but we both looked at Hannah. As far as we knew, Hannah hadn't noticed anything strange about the house. She was so innocent and lovely, we couldn't ruin the house for her. We couldn't let her know. Ness gave me a significant glance. I knew she would tell me once we were alone. Then she did the bravest thing that I have ever seen. She opened the door, looking down into the darkness, turned on the lights, and went down into the basement alone. She didn't even run back up the stairs like I would have, like I knew she wanted to. She was calm. It was a big fuck you to whatever she had seen. And even though I didn't know yet what had happened, I was proud of her. Ness went back to cooking dinner, and I went back to reading Hannah's cards. I still had to consult the manual for almost every card, but Hannah didn't seem to mind. I placed the first card in the cross down. It was the Pale Rider. Death on a black horse. Uh-oh. That doesn't look good, Hannah said, chipper as usual. Don't worry. I smiled. Contrary to popular belief, this card usually signifies change, not actual death. Oh, that's good, she laughed. The next card mentioned something about sleepwalking or nightmares. I ignored the card and told her that she needed to keep on studying hard to meet her goals. The next card was the devil. The next card mentioned loss of control. The next card mentioned imminent physical danger. The next card mentioned mourning the loss of loved ones. It went on and on. Every single card on the table spelled doom. Ness gave me a strange look. She knew when I was lying and could tell that what I was telling Hannah was complete bullshit. I wasn't telling her what the cards actually meant. But Hannah didn't know that. She was totally satisfied with my card reading prowess and thanked me for the reading. I gave Ness a look. I'll tell you later, is what it said. We all ate dinner. Ness had made her favorite meal, macaroni with chicken. It was delicious. Then it came time for Ness to put all the ingredients back in the basement. I can come with you, I told her, but she shook her head. I've got this. I was leaning against the kitchen counter where she could see me, ready to run to her side if she needed it. She opened the basement door, stared into the darkness, and flicked on the light. She didn't look away until the lights were fully on and she was satisfied that there was nothing out of the ordinary going on. She glanced at me with a smile and took the first step down. She immediately screamed and stumbled backwards up the stairs, hitting the wall behind her and nearly falling headfirst down the staircase. Ness, I shouted and ran to her. I looked in the basement. Other than the creepy stairs, there was nothing there. I looked at her, concerned. She was gasping and holding her side. She must have hit the doorknob when she tried to get back up the stairs. She nodded at me. I'm fine. And then she picked up the bag of frozen chicken that she had dropped and proceeded to walk down the stairs. I started to follow her, but she stopped me. Stay there. It's okay. I'm fine. I waited at the top of the stairs and didn't budge until she was safe at my side. Come with me. She motioned and we both went up to our room, making sure we turned off the basement light before we left. Once we were in our room with the door shut behind us, Ness told me what she had seen. The first time, when the light was flickering on and off, during one of the flashes she had seen a woman crouched at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at her. I asked her what the woman looked like. A shadow, she answered. The second time I made sure to watch the entire time the lights were flickering. I wasn't going to let my mind play tricks on me again. But she had stopped to glance at me, and when she turned back to the basement she had seen the woman. But this time she was crawling up the stairs. Ness was no liar. She abhorred anything but absolute truth. I knew she wasn't lying to me. What about the cards? You sounded so odd when you were giving Hannah her reading. What was going on? So I tried to explain to her what Hannah's cards had been trying to say. But as I did, something happened to Ness' face. Have you ever seen The Exorcism of Emily Rose? There's a part where Emily is out on the street and the faces of regular people start to change. That's exactly what happened to Ness. As I was talking to her, her eyes seemed to shrink back into her head, leaving black empty pits behind them. Her jaw dropped open in a grotesque scream. She tilted her head to the side and looked at me without eyes. It was the single most terrifying thing that I have ever seen. Then she was normal again. She asked me what was wrong, why I suddenly looked so strange. I didn't know how to tell her what I had just seen. You glitched, I told her. I what? It was like with old holograms, how the picture changes and sort of flashes, like it's glitching. Your face did that. You weren't. You turned into something else for a second. I struggled for words and found myself fighting against tears. She pulled me into a hug and I cried. I'll admit it. I didn't understand what was happening to us, or why. So I cried. That was the turning point for us. That's when we knew that something was wrong. That's when we realized that we needed help. The Nova House. Part 4. I cannot express to you how badly I wish that Sam and Dean were real. I had this fantasy that they would show up at our door, already aware that something was wrong, and shoot rock salt right in the face of whatever was living in our home. But this was something we would have to figure out on our own. Which meant lots of internet research. Searching for the Nova House online only brings up the student housing section of the Snow College website. There are pictures of our kitchen, but no information on the house or who lived there before we did. So I broadened the search. It turns out the Snow College was built on top of Fort Ephraim. The entire area was settled by Dutch Mormon pioneers. The school's practice field sat directly on top of the old town square, I pulled up the old town blueprints and learned that our house was built on the foundation of a previous house in the fort 110 years ago. I doubt it was called the Nauvoo house back then. It turns out that the Mormons and the Indians didn't exactly get along. Fort Ephraim was the most important fort in Sanpete during the Black Hawk War. Wikipedia unfortunately doesn't have a section titled Violent Deaths in Sanpete County during the Black Hawk War, so that was about as far as my research took me. I intended to take the next step and go to the Ephraim courthouse and try to track records for previous owners, but I never made it that far. Aside from my research on the area, I was researching the paranormal. I scoured the internet trying to find reliable sources of information that might explain what was going on in our house. Sorting out fact from fiction turned out to be nearly impossible. I found a couple of paranormal investigative sites for Utah and sent them all emails. I doubted their authenticity, but I figured it was worth a shot. I told them about the water heater and how it nearly killed Ness on our first day. I told them about the mirrors, the tarot cards, the woman on the stairs. I told them about Ness glitching in the handprints under the doors and windows. I told them everything. I begged them for help. I didn't know what else to do. Each site said to expect about a week before getting a reply. But we couldn't just sit there. We told Shelby, Gaydon's mom, and she believed us from the get-go. They bought a sage for the house online, but we had to wait until it arrived more than a week later. Until then things only got worse. There was a mirror in the living room next to the front door, and every single time I passed it I would see a second reflection, as though I had passed by it twice. We saw strange reflections in the windows at night and the mirrors in the day. We started staying up together. Gaydon began to spend the night with us even though it was against the house rules. We would sit in the living room until morning and just talk. I remember one night I got up to go to the kitchen for a glass of water. I heard Ness get up behind me and follow me. I heard her steps on the hardwood floor. I turned around to say something to her, and there was no one there. I could still see her in the living room with Gaydon. She hadn't followed me at all. But I had heard her so clearly. One night Gaydon couldn't stay with us. At around 4 in the morning I had to go to the bathroom, so Ness came with me. I was only in the bathroom for a minute when I heard her call out my name from the kitchen. I ran out immediately and asked her what had happened. She explained that as soon as she was alone she heard someone chuckle. The sound was coming from the corner of the ceiling above the refrigerator. The chuckle turned into a giggle, and then a malicious laugh. The sound came towards her across the ceiling. Like something was crawling on the ceiling towards her. It disappeared the moment I opened the bathroom door. The next day we were sitting in the kitchen. All of our roommates were at classes. We had given up on going to school at this point, and I was whistling a song. It was from American Horror Story. Bad choice of song, I know. But it was stuck in my head. I whistled a few bars and then stopped for no reason. But the song kept going. Ness and I stared at each other. The last 5 or 6 notes of the song just kept going. Someone else finished it. There was no one else in the house. The night that broke me happened a few days later. For some reason or another Ness was with Gaydon. I don't remember why, but I was alone in the house. I was dead tired. I decided to try sleeping that night. I couldn't keep up this ridiculous schedule we were keeping. So I went upstairs, snuggled under my covers for the first time in weeks, and fell asleep immediately. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but I will never be able to forget why. I heard a cracking sound from the corner of the room by Hannah's door. Like snapping bones. My eyes flew open and I stared into the darkness. I held my breath and listened. The house was silent. I sat there for what felt like an hour, on edge, terrified. But it seemed like nothing else was going to happen. So eventually I closed my eyes again. Seconds later I heard it. An awful cracking sound. Only this time it was coming from the center of the room, only a few feet away. I know that as a writer I'm supposed to be able to express exactly how this made me feel, but I can't. To say that I was horrified would be a gross understatement. Something was there, in the room with me. I couldn't see it, but it was there. I knew it like I knew my own name. Your imagination is a terrible thing when you're afraid. My mind conjured up every grotesque creature I was capable of, wondering which one of these was a mere 4 feet away. But though I was afraid, I was still exhausted. After an eternity of waiting, I felt my eyes drift shut once more. And then, the dreaded sound, inches from my face. I sat up like I had been electrocuted and dove for the lamp. Warm light flooded the room. I was alone. I had never felt more alone. The house had a polarizing effect on the two of us. It made Ness agitated and irritable. She began to snap at me over the most ridiculous things. She was constantly angry and looking for a fight. She always had a temper, but never like that. As for me, I became depressed. I was utterly hopeless. I was trapped in a house that was going to kill me. I knew by that point that I would die there. I didn't have any doubt. Things were getting worse by the day. If nothing else, I would die of exhaustion, plain and simple. For a period of 3 days I lay on the couch in the living room. I didn't eat and got up only to use the bathroom. I just lay there, waiting. Ness finally came to me and demanded that I get up. But I couldn't. I started to cry, and I couldn't stop. That's when she decided enough was enough. Both of us were raised Mormon, but we left the church pretty soon after going to college. We hadn't wanted to get the house blessed, just out of principle, but I guess seeing me break down that way was enough motivation for her to do something. She called our friend Tanner. We hadn't seen him in weeks since we'd stopped going to school, but we needed his help. He held the highest order of the priesthood for the Mormon church and we wanted him to bless the house. She told him over the phone, briefly, what had been going on, and he agreed to come over right away. 5 minutes later there was a knock at our door and we let him in. We gathered around the living room and he said a prayer. He commanded whatever had taken residency in our home to leave. He invoked the power of God for our safety and placed the house under his protection. While he was saying those things, I began to hear something. There was a sound coming from the basement. A long and drawn-out moan. It started about halfway through the prayer and by the time he ended his blessing on the house the moan had turned into a scream. It filled my head like a physical pressure, growing in strength and volume. I covered my ears with both hands and dropped to my knees. The sound was angry, malicious. It felt like nails on a chalkboard inside my head. Ness and Tanner ran to me and asked what was wrong. They couldn't hear it, but I couldn't hear anything else. The scream was a protest against the prayer. It went on for a full minute before the house finally went silent. I stood up carefully and looked around. Ness and I had the same wary expression. The house was quiet. Far too quiet. We thanked Tanner and he left. We tiptoed around the house that night. The air was thick and stifling. It didn't feel like we were safe. It felt like we were being watched. That's when things started happening during the day. We had had the odd occurrence before when the sun was up, but not like this. The shadow people in the mirrors returned with a vengeance. The woman we saw in our bedroom was slowly turning on a rope hung from the ceiling. I saw a man with broad shoulder and a thick coat standing behind me in the living room. The corner next to Hannah's door was like an electric hotspot of some kind. Ness went upstairs to grab a pack of gum and turned her back to that corner. She felt, not heard, something move towards her. She spun around to see what was there and saw nothing. The room was bright and sunny, if a little colder than the rest of the house. She bent back down to the drawer she was digging through and felt the thing move closer. She stood up and whipped around again. Nothing. Not wanting to know what would happen when it reached her, she ran out of the room without the gum she was looking for. For lunch we pulled out the ground beef we had bought the day before. It was completely rotten, almost green. We threw it in the trash. A few minutes later the rotting meat starting to sink like someone was forcing the trash down, compacting it with their hand. But the meat wasn't heavy enough to do that. We watched the meat sink down to the bottom of the can with a detached sort of horror. We almost expected these things now. But that afternoon I felt the first stirrings of hope that I had felt in months. One of the paranormal investigators had emailed me back. Here's the email, copied straight from my inbox. I've only changed his name. Yes, I've kept my emails with him. They're proof of what happened to me. Hello Rachel, I received a request for help through paranormal societies which we are affiliated with. I am very interested in your case and will contact you tomorrow and we can chat about it. In the meantime you can take a look at our website to see who we are and what we are about. Talk with you soon. Jacob Yarn. He had the name of his organization at the bottom too along with his phone number and the website where I found him, but I don't feel comfortable sharing that online. If you're in Utah and your house is haunted and you need help, PM me and I will send you their information. His email was like the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. I had been wandering in the dark for so long I had consigned myself to it. But here it was, like a life preserver, hope. The Nova House. Part 5. True to his word Jacob called the next day. Ness and I were at Walmart getting groceries at the time. It sounds odd that we were doing something so normal, but life had to go on, even while we were being terrorized by our own house. We still had to buy milk. It was getting colder so we were in the leggings section, looking for socks and tights we could wear under our clothes to keep warm. We intended to wear these things inside, not outside. Outside it was a little chilly. Inside it was like living in an icebox. I answered the phone and Jacob introduced himself. He said that our case sounded really interesting and that we had experienced more activity than most hauntings he's previously dealt with. He asked me to explain it all from the beginning and not to leave anything out, so I did. I will always remember the faces of the people in line as I retold our story to Jacob. They looked at us like we were crazy, and we sure felt like it was true. This kind of thing didn't happen to sane people. The worst part was wondering if it really was all in your head. Maybe you didn't see that reflection in the mirror. Maybe it was just pareidolia and you were making something out of nothing. Maybe we really were crazy. But Jacob believed us. He really, honestly believed us. Even Caden, though he stayed the night often and listened to our stories, thought we were freaking ourselves out. He didn't think anything was going on. But Jacob did. He listened to every word, hanging on the details, and apologized repeatedly for being so excited. See, houses like ours didn't happen every day. He had the chance to get some really good evidence of the paranormal. He was giddy and very sympathetic at the same time. I liked him instantly. After I told him everything, with Ness chiming in every once in a while, he decided that he and his team would come and investigate in 2 weeks. My heart sank. 2 more weeks of living there? Of fearing for our lives? But at least there would be a deadline now. There was an end in sight. Jacob asked us to start cataloging everything that happened. He wanted us to take notes, pictures, and videos. We agreed that it was a good idea, scheduled a date for their arrival, and hung up. Now came the icky part. We had to go to our roommates and tell them what was going on. There were 6 of us living in the house, but none of the other girls had gone through what we had. I couldn't tell you why, but it helped feed the fear that we were crazy. That it was all in our heads. Each of them at one time or another had remarked on something out of the ordinary, but Ness and I always hurriedly assured them that nothing was wrong and gave all sorts of excuses for the house. We didn't want them to go through what we were going through. It turns out that we were only making things harder on ourselves. First we told Bryce and Taylor. We had to let them know that we were going to have a group of strange people in the house. We didn't want them to have to be there, so we planned on suggesting they spend the weekend at friends. Here's how that conversation went. Me, there's something we need to tell you guys. Taylor, what's up? Ness, there's something that Rachel and I have been dealing with for a few months now. We really wanted to keep you guys out of it, but it's only gotten worse. And now it's to the point where we need some outside help. Bryce, what's going on? Me, the house is haunted. I know that sounds crazy, believe me I know, but it's true. We're having some investigators come over in 2 weeks and we think it would be best if you guys stayed the day somewhere else. You don't have to. Heaven knows it's your house too, but we just wanted to keep you guys out of this. Bryce, no it's not. Ness, no it's not what? Bryce, the house isn't haunted. Me, I know that's hard to believe, but it is. Bryce, no it's not. Me, look, I know you guys haven't experienced anything, but Ness and I have. We've been dealing with this for months and we're terrified. We need help and we need you to believe us. Bryce, whatever. And they walked away. They walked away. Ness was furious. Her hands started shaking and she fought of the urge to chase them down and scream at them. I just fought the urge to cry. To have someone so blatantly not believe you was horrible. It was like being slapped in the face. We called Caden and he agreed to come over for moral support. Then we told Kaylee. She didn't believe us at first. She looked at us like we were playing a joke on her. But then she started to think and noted that she had had some strange experiences in the house. She had just ignored them. A lot of her things went missing. She found her keys in the microwave once. She heard odd noises at night. She put it all together and admitted that we might be telling the truth. Maybe the house was haunted. Who was she to say otherwise? We were so relieved. It was pretty late at that point, and she didn't want to stay the night anymore. So she called a friend who would let her stay over. We were all in the living room talking when she decided to go. She turned off her room light, shut the door, and walked back into the living room. She put her hand on the front door's handle and jumped back like she had been burned. What? Ness and I asked simultaneously. It just turned under my hand, she shouted and shivered. The doorknob turned underneath my hand, like someone was turning it on the other side. I jumped up and pulled the door open. There was no one outside that I could see. Ew. That was creepy. She shook her head over and over. Then she looked into the kitchen and froze. Guys. Should that rag be moving like that? We all turned towards the kitchen to see what she was looking at. There was a rag hung over the top of the cabinet door underneath the kitchen sink. It was moving, https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=2cd4rcf29kc. I peeked around the corner to see if the fan was on, but it wasn't. We never turned it on because the house was always so cold anyway. We gathered in the doorway and watched it move. It was moving up and down like someone was picking it up and letting it drop. Ness told me to pull out my phone and record it. So I did. We let it move for a few moments, and then she told me to stop. She went over to the rag and put her hand underneath to see if there was some kind of air current making it move. There wasn't. She put her hand on the bottom of it and it kept going, brushing against her skin to move up and down. We gasped and she ripped the towel off the door and threw it on the counter. "You can't have this to play with," she shouted to the ceiling. "That's it. I'm out," I said and shook my head. "Babe, can we stay at your place tonight?" Ness asked Caden. He lived a good 20 minutes away at his parents' house, but he said it was alright. "Then I'm gonna go throw my pajamas in a bag and we can go," I said. Ness agreed to do the same. "Wait, don't leave me down here alone," Kaylee said and ran up the stairs with us. It took us maybe a full minute to get bags together. We ran back down the stairs. Kaylee ran to her room, and she screamed. Her door was wide open, every light in her room was on, her wardrobe doors and drawers were open, and her belongings were strewn across the floor. "You saw me turn off the lights, right?" She turned to us, frantic. "You know I'm a neat freak. You know my room wasn't like this 30 seconds ago." We knew. The three of us left the house as fast as we could. Ness and I piled into Caden's car. As we pulled away, I looked up to the window of our bedroom. The light was on and in the window I saw someone. It was a person, but they were so thin it could have been a skeleton. It watched us pull away. "Ness," I said quietly. "I see it," she said. We drove away as fast as we could. The next morning the three of us woke up. We'd all fallen asleep on Caden's king-sized bed. I hadn't slept so well in months. The sun seemed brighter, I felt lighter, and the day just felt like it had some promise. I couldn't believe that we hadn't run away sooner. We had told Shelby everything that happened, and that morning I called my parents too. I told my dad and he didn't even question me. He just asked me if I was alright and if I wanted to come home. I told him that we were going to get it taken care of and that I loved him. Shelby went to work that day. She's an RN at Gunnison Hospital. She was talking to one of the other nurses there about what was happening in our house. They were in the hall and a lady there overheard them talking. "Excuse me," she said and walked up to them. "Are you talking about the house kitty corner to the football field at Snow College?" she asked. Shelby was shocked. "Actually, yes. Why?" "I lived there 30 years ago and it's haunted," the woman said. She then told Shelby about what he had experienced. Her account was incredibly similar to ours. While the three of them were talking, another nurse overheard. She came up to them and asked, "I'm sorry to eavesdrop, but are you talking about the Nauvoo house at Snow?" Shelby looked her. "Yes, we are." "Why?" "I lived there 7 years ago. It's haunted." Shelby was floored. The woman then told her what had happened to her and her roommates in the house. She called us immediately. I cannot tell you how vindicated we felt. That fact that 2 other people had gone through the same thing meant that we weren't crazy. This was actually happening to us. Then I got a phone call from my dad. Now that I'm writing this out, it doesn't sound real. But it was. My dad had been talking to my mom in the hallway at church. He was telling her about our house and what was happening. While they were talking, a woman approached them and said, "You guessed it. Are you talking about the house kitty corner to the football field at Snow?" They said yes, and the woman said, "I lived there 30 years ago. It's haunted." And as the three of them were talking, another woman overheard. She explained that she had lived there 7 years ago and confirmed that the house was haunted. These 4 women had been roommates at different times. The chances that we found them all, on the same day, in 2 completely different cities, is unreal. But they each told the same story. Every one of them. They talked about how the house was always so cold. They had each lived in the same room that Ness and I were living in. They each remembered waking up in the middle of the night and being unable to breathe, like something was sitting on top of them. They talked about how the stove would turn on, how the house almost caught fire nearly every time they went outside until the landlord finally replaced it. They talked about the reflections in mirrors, the strange sounds in the basement. I literally burst into tears on the phone with my dad. I couldn't believe it. It was more than I would have ever dared hope for. I called Jacob right away. He was ecstatic. The house officially had a haunted history that went back at least 30 years. Our story now had credibility. He told us that most of his team could be there that night. We couldn't have been happier. Until we realized that if we wanted to end it, we're going to have to go back. That night. The Nova House. Final. I've been putting off the last part to my story. Endings are always a daunting task and I want to make sure that I get this one right. But I've also been a little afraid to go back to that night. I've avoided thinking about it for so long, but that's not healthy. It's time I finish my story. We drove back to the house in silence. Black clouds were gathering in the distance, which seemed only fitting. We had called our roommates and let them know that the investigators were coming. They weren't happy about it, but they couldn't do anything about it, or so we thought. 10 minutes into the drive I got a call from the bishop of our area. Bryce had called the landlord and complained about our plans. The landlord was good friends with the local bishop, and asked him to call me. I was a little upset that they didn't just talk to us and felt the need to go behind our backs, but I understood. They didn't believe us. The bishop called and asked how I was doing. I ignored his attempt at small talk and told him that we had been pretty awful, but that we were taking care of it tonight. Yeah, I heard about that. You've got some internet people coming to the house. Yes. I also hear that you've been having boys in the house after hours. It seems to me like these ghost stories are a mighty fine excuse for breaking the rules. I was livid. How dare he say that to me? After everything we had gone through. How dare he? Sir, I said. The house is haunted. We have lived in fear for months. You are under no obligation to believe us, but you at least owe us the courtesy of staying out of our way. Well, there's no need to get angry. We're just having a polite conversation. Your landlord is just concerned. See, I bless the house at the beginning of every semester. So you can see why your stories of ghosts might be a bit surprising, he said. I understand and I don't pretend to have an explanation for what's going on. But I am going to do everything in my power to end it. He was taken aback by my attitude, but I was in no mood for games. Especially if he wasn't even going to give our story a chance. Well, we can't stop you from having strangers over before curfew, but we all think it would be best if I and the bishopric come over as well, just to make sure everything is okay. I was angry, but I said it would be fine. If he wanted to come see the show, let him. The investigators were supposed to be there at 7 that night. We arrived at the house around 5. When we got there, Bryce and Taylor had some boys over. Hey guys, Bryce said with a smirk. Our basement is haunted. Wanna come see? She looked right at us and laughed. Please don't. Ness asked. Things always got worse when people went down there. It was like daring the house to make a move. It always did. You don't have to believe us, but please don't. If you can just wait until tomorrow to have your fun, we would be incredibly grateful, I said. Bryce sighed dramatically and walked away. The bishopric came an hour early. They shook our hands and insisted that we all sit down in the living room for a chat. Ness and I were agitated and fidgety. We didn't want to be there, much less with a group of people that didn't believe us. They asked us to tell them what was going on, so we did. We told them, the bishopric and all our roommates, exactly what had been happening for the past few months. We didn't spare any details, we gave them everything we had. When we had finished, we knew they thought we were crazy. You could see it on their faces. T-Hen Bryce spoke up. If the basement is so haunted, then why don't we all go down there right now? I think that's a great idea, the bishop said. I stood up. That's really a terrible idea. Let's just wait until the investigators get here and then we can all go down together. Then we're only going down once and as a group. No, Bryce said, looking at me. I want to see what all the fuss is about. Let's go, guys. She stood up and everyone followed. Ness and I stayed at the top of the stairs, but the entire time the bishopric was saying things like, yup, take a look at these pipes. I bet you get some good banging sounds from these. Oh yeah, back in my construction days we would have taken care of a place like this. Oh, look at this wiring. They basically took every excuse they could to reason away our experiences. Except we had never had problems with banging sounds or the wiring to the freezer or drafts from the 3 windows at the top. They hadn't even properly listened to our story, and now they were trying to reason it all away. I couldn't take it. In the Harry Potter books, when you get to Professor Umbridge, you feel a special kind of hatred for her. You hate Umbridge more than Voldemort or the Death Eaters. I think it's because even though Voldemort is the greater evil, we don't have to deal with genocidal maniacs in our regular lives. But we've all dealt with an Umbridge. We've all felt Harry's indignation. She's a real-life villain and we hate the hopelessness and the helplessness that she makes us feel. She's the authority figure abusing her power. She's the one telling lies. The bishopric was my umbrage. I sat there at the top of the stairs and felt like I was a child again. They were belittling what had happened to us. They were calling us liars. I ran outside and called my dad. I was crying again. Yes, I cried a lot. It was a traumatic time, he answered, and I told him that they didn't believe us. I didn't know what to do. They wouldn't even bless the house because they already had it the beginning of the semester and didn't think the house needed it. My dad calmed me down and told me to wait for the investigators. He told me not to waste time on people that didn't think I was telling the truth. A car pulled up exactly as I ended the call with my father, and I could not have been more grateful. Jacob got out and introduced himself. He was a shorter man, but stocky with broad shoulder. His arms were covered in tattoos and he was drinking a 44 ounces Coke. He was even better in person. He introduced his two team members, Haley and Daniel. He explained that the fourth member of their team was a psychic, but that she hadn't been able to come on such short notice. I walked them into the house. Jacob went straight to the bishop and held out his hand. He introduced himself as one of the internet people and said that he was here to help. The bishop was totally out of his depth with Jacob. He couldn't intimidate him or bully him. The tension between those two was palpable. After a few minutes of awkward conversation, the bishopric excused themselves. The three of them finally left, and with them, our roommates left too. A few minutes later, Shelby pulled up, wanting to be there to support us. In total we had 3 ghost hunters, me, Ness, her boyfriend Caden, and his mother Shelby. Thankfully Jacob already knew our story and had briefed his team, so we didn't have to go through it all again. They set up their equipment in the living room. They had cameras, audio equipment, EMF sensors, and temperature sensors. They explained to us what each one did, and asked if they could start with an EVP session. We gave them the go-ahead for whatever they wanted. The 7 of us sat in a circle. Haley held a powerful microphone hook up to headphones. She would hear any voices there were in real time. Jacob had a handheld recorder. He started to ask questions. Is there someone in the house with us? Do you have anything you'd like to say? Why are you here? What is your name? After each question he would wait for about 10 seconds, each of us silent, and then play back the recording to see if he had captured a voice. It was horrible. The anticipation was going to kill me. We listened to the silence on his recordings, waiting. At first I didn't want to hear anything. I didn't need any more nightmare fuel in my life. But after 20 minutes, they had nothing. Nothing. Ness and I began to look at each other nervously. There were 2 options that we could see. Option 1, they weren't getting anything on the recordings because there was nothing to record. The house wasn't really haunted, we were just certifiably insane, and after this would spend the rest of our days locked in an insane asylum. Option 2, they weren't getting anything because the house was too smart to let itself be heard. Option 1 was, before the haunting, my absolute worst fear. Option 2 was even worse. We knew that if the house was that smart, if it knew not to leave any evidence, that we were fucked. If the investigators left now, then our last chance would be gone. We'd be finished. My fear of dying the house returned with full force. That's when I heard it. A knocking sound. But it wasn't coming from the front door, it was coming from the basement. I turned towards the basement door at the same time as Shelby. She met my gaze and I knew that she had heard it too, though no one else in the group seemed to have noticed. You know, the worst stuff always happened in the basement, Shelby said. Maybe we should try to get something down there. That's a great idea, Jacob said, and everyone started picking up the equipment. He went to the door first, while we were all still in living room. I heard him shout, "Hey!" into the basement, as if he was going to get some kind of reply. Then he sent his team down first to set up their equipment, but he pulled me aside in the kitchen. Our psychic wasn't able to come, he said. But she did a reading on the area and she got 2 words that really stood out to her. I just wanted to run them by you to see if they meant anything. Okay, sure, I said. What were the words? Cellar and dolls, he said. Does that mean anything to you? Well, the worst stuff has always happened in the basement, but none of us have any dolls, I said. I've had plenty of horrible experiences with porcelain dolls, so I avoid them like the plague. He nodded and held out his hand towards the basement. Shall we? He asked with a smile. We went into the basement together. Keep the lights off, he said. That sounded like the opposite of a good idea, but he was the expert. Haley pulled up the only chair in the place and sat down with her recorder. Ready, she said. Daniel adjusted the camera on top of the freezer and then took his place in the corner of the basement. He held a camera in his hands as well. Ready, he said. Shelby sat at the top of the stairs, Ness stood in the middle, and I was standing on the bottom step. John stood in the center of the basement and started to speak. They were the same kind of questions as before, only this time he began to get answers. Daniel took a picture and the flash lit up the basement for a fraction of a second. He took pictures every 3 seconds, like clockwork. "I'm picking up the voice of a woman," Haley said, listening hard. She lowered the microphone to the ground. "It gets louder when I get closer to the ground." I swallowed hard. I knew exactly who she was talking about. "There's more than one voice down here," she said, confused. "I can't quite pick out what they're saying." She closed her eyes and concentrated. "If there's someone in here with us," Jacob said loudly. "Show us a sign." "Touch me," pulled Haley's hair. "Prove that you're here." We waited in the dark. The flashing camera lit up the space every few seconds and I refused to look at any of the walls, afraid of the shadows and what I might see. We waited for the sign in silence. "Come on. Pull on my shirt. Say something into this recorder. Show us that you're here." That's when I felt a hand grab my ankle through the slates in the stairs. I screamed and jumped off the stairs towards Jacob. "Something grabbed me," I shouted, horrified. Nothing had ever touched us in the house. Haley moved underneath the stairs. "The woman's voice is under here," she said, amazed. I was shaking like a leaf. I could still feel the hand on me, its iron grip around my ankle. I can still feel it sometimes. "Good," Jacob said. "Now you need to listen to me." He spoke into the recorder. "You are not welcome here. Whatever and whoever is in this house, you need to leave. This is not your home." The camera flashed and he played back the recording. Silence. I could only see him during the flash. It was so dark and so cold. "Believe in your God or in Christ, whatever brings you comfort. Your belief will help you move on and cross over to the other side," he said into the blackness. Then someone whispered into my ear. I felt their breath on my neck and the words, "No God." Guys, I just heard a man say there is no God. And I was done. I ran up the stairs, past Ness and Shelby, and into the brightly lit kitchen. I leaned over the sink, threw up violently and cried. I felt violated. I could still feel a hand on my leg and that breath on my skin. It was focusing on me. Whatever was in the house, it wasn't attacking Ness the way it was attacking me. I was a victim in my own goddamned house. After a few minutes I realized that I had left Ness down there. She would never have left me alone, never. I couldn't do that to her. Not now. So I went back. I stepped lightly on the first stair and saw Ness, sitting on the steps. She was holding her arm into the darkness underneath the steps. The look on her face was pure rage. I knew that she was daring something to touch her, to grab her the way it had grabbed me. I reached out to tell her to stop before something ripped off her arm, and the camera flashed. In that brief second I saw a face staring at me from the darkness by the stairs. It was only for a fraction of a second, but those yellow eyes will never leave me. I will see them until the day that I die. Ness told me after that. I started mumbling, "The face, the face, the face," over and over on repeat after that. I don't remember it. I sat next to Ness on the steps and she held my hand while tears ran down my face. That was when we all decided to end it. We didn't know what we were doing exactly, but that was the moment we took back control. Ness reached out to her grandmother who had passed a few months before. Her grandma was the toughest bitch she had ever known, and she asked for her help, even though she didn't really believe she could hear. I asked God for help. I told him that if he wanted to prove he actually gave a shit about me, that he would help me now because I couldn't do it anymore. And Shelby said a prayer. She asked for God to protect us and to stop whatever force was taking over our lives. We did this at the exact same moment. "Guys," Haley said quietly. "I just heard the word angel." There was a sigh, like a rush of escaping air, and the basement got lighter. We could suddenly hear cars driving by outside. The air wasn't quite so heavy. The weight in my chest that I'd been carrying around for months disappeared. "Did you guys feel that?" Jacob asked with a smile. We did. Ness started crying. I'd never seen her cry before. She told me the next day that her grandmother used to have a secret nickname for her. Angel. The team packed up their equipment, wished us luck, and told us to contact them if we ever needed anything at all. And they left. We lived in the house for another 6 months after that. The house never gave us another problem. We talked about it occasionally and came to the same conclusion. There had been multiple things in our house. There were spirits and memories, things that were frightening, but not cruel. Some of the things we saw played on repeat, like a three-dimensional GIF. And then there had been something else. I don't know if it was a demon, but I believe that it was not, and never had been human. It was intelligent and malicious and evil. But now it was gone. Going back to real life after that was hard. Ness and I are now diagnosed with PTSD. We're working through it together. Some days are harder than others. One night I saw the reflection of a little girl on the TV and it took me half an hour to figure out that it was the bookshelf in the corner casting an odd reflection. Once I figured out what it was, I collapsed to my knees and cried for an hour. Ness can't talk about it anymore. I asked her to help me write this, but she couldn't do it. It's too painful for her, and I understand. But the story doesn't end there. Months later I was talking to some friends, Dallin and Fletcher, about what had happened. We were sitting in the living room and they asked to go see the basement, where it all went down. I went with them and watched as they investigated. In the basement there was a 6-foot by 3-foot hole blasted into the wall where all the giant pipes fed through. Dallin of the boys jumped up on the freezer to get a look into the hole. He pulled out his phone and used it as a flashlight. "This goes somewhere," he said. "Yeah, it probably goes under the whole house." I nodded. "No, there's a tunnel off to the side. It's big enough to crawl through. It looks like it turns off to the right." "Guys, I'm glad you're having fun, but I'm just trying to put all this behind me. We don't need to go digging." They ignored me and ran outside. Fletcher was convinced he was going to figure out where this tunnel led. I just rolled my eyes and followed. They walked around to the side of the house. The landlord had been doing a lot of construction in the yard on that side. 2 mounds of dirt were piled up against the side of the house and next to them was a large plank of wood. "Wonder what's under here?" Fletch said with a smile. "Help me lift this up," he said. He and Dallin heaved it to the side and my jaw dropped. Underneath that plank of wood was a sunk 6 feet into the ground. It looked like there had once been stairs, but they had been blasted away and bricked over. "Yahtzee!" Fletcher shouted and jumped down into the hole. Dallin followed. There was a lock on the door, but it was already broken, so they walked inside. "I hope you understand why I didn't go in myself." They explained that there were 2 windows, each one had wooden planks nailing them shut. That's what the 2 dirt mounds on the side of the house were hiding. There were multiple holes in the walls, big enough to crawl through. Fletcher looks through one that went straight into the basement. He said he could have army crawled right into our house. There were other tunnels that appeared to go other places. I begged them not to enter any of them and they thankfully listened. "Hey look!" Dallin shouted and ran back out to meet me. He held up 2 dolls for me to see. That's when I put it together. What the psychic had said. Cellar and dolls. "Put them back." I ordered and insisted that they get out of there immediately. We moved a few months later. Jacob eventually got back to me. He had in that he wanted to show me. When he called "Hey!" into the basement, something immediately answered him, but all of us had been in the other room at the time. He asked if I wanted to see any of the other evidence that they had found, but I declined. "I'm sorry about that, guys. I know you'd be interested, but I just can't mentally handle anymore. It's bad enough knowing that evil is out there. I don't need to see what it looks like or hear what it sounds like. I've had enough." That's my story. I've emailed with Jacob a bit back and forth. He says that I'm a sensitive, meaning that I can see things that other people can't see. The problem is that the things I see know that I can see them. They notice me the same way that I notice them. He explained that I'm basically a supernatural hotspot, which makes me feel better about the things that happened in my childhood. But I know what to do now. And though I'm continually encountering things that I can't explain, I will never be a victim again.